In today's video, I want to talk about light modifiers and why you need them. I'm going to do three things actually. One, I'm going to show you some old examples of when I was using lights in some of my productions with little to no modification. Two, I'm going to show you some in-studio examples of the light modifier that I'm using right now to film this video and what it looks like with just the softbox, with the grid off and with the grid on. And then B, I'm going to show you some in-studio examples of using light modification and some current day examples of how I like to use light modifiers when it comes to creating my productions. So the main reason that you need some type of light modification or light modifiers or a good source of light for your video production, for your photography, is because it's the foundation. Lighting, composition, you nail those two things and you're gonna have a great image. No matter which way you put it, no matter what kind of camera you shoot it on, you're gonna have a great image. A lot of times when we're just getting started, or even when we've been doing this for a while, and I'm guilty of this myself, we sometimes get caught up in the latest and greatest gadgets, right? We want this thing, we want that thing. Oh, this camera can do this type of frame rates. This camera has this type of Kodak, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, none of that matters if you can't nail the basics. Now, can you use natural lighting to get great images? Absolutely, of course you can, okay? But when you're able to control your light, now you're able to really shape your images. You're really kind of able to paint the image, as they say, and create the real type of look and feel that you're going for. Something that you might see in your mind that you're trying to create on screen. So without doing too much talking, let's jump into some older examples. Now, here's a good example. On this particular shoot, I had actually got my first panel light. It came with a little bit of diffusion, not very much, okay? Just whatever they included with the light. But I knew on this shoot that I was gonna be doing some type of interview portion, and I knew I was gonna need some type of lighting. Now it kind of worked out because I had this person with their back to a window and I was able to use this light to kind of overpower that window and not have the highlights, I guess, like completely blown out. Now the windows were a little tinted, so, you know, that kind of did help in my favor. But, you know, as you can see, the lighting is a little bit harsh. The lighting works, it lights up my subject, they're not dark or they don't have weird shadows or anything like that on their face. So in that sense, it's a success. But the lighting could be a lot more softer, it could maybe wrap a little bit more, it could be more intentional. But at this point in time, this was my first light and I just needed something to light up the set or light up my subject. And so I got this one panel light, nice light, works really great, nothing wrong with panel lights. But as you can see, my lighting here isn't super flattering. It's not super harsh and ugly, but it's not super flattering either. Now here's another example, which is actually a good example because I have this old one and I have a newer one that I'm actually gonna show you a little bit later in the video. So here I am, I'm shooting this guy in his office, and like most offices, it's terrible lighting. It's overhead fluorescent lighting, so it's really flat. It's gonna cast really ugly shadows, right? And so I need some type of light to be able to light up his face so this way he doesn't have any weird or awkward shadows on there. Now, whenever you're using lighting that you're bringing in, you always want it to be as flattering or as soft as possible. And that's not always the case if you don't have proper light modification. But it's okay, you can still get the job done. But the good thing is that I'll show you an example of what light modification and composition can do as you start to understand it a little bit more. So next, let's look at a couple examples of where I'm just using natural light. Now, when you're first getting started, natural light is going to be probably your best friend because you probably spend all your money on a camera and a lens and you probably didn't get lights or audio or whatever the case may be. So the least thing you can do is have a nice, clean and beautiful image. So natural lighting works really well, especially if you're a one-man band, you're running gun, you don't have time to always be setting up lights. You always want to try to find a nice spot where you can get some natural light. So usually being next to a window, if that window's got a curtain in front of it, it's even better because it softens the light. But if not, you usually want to find some spot where you can get your subject lit up pretty well, especially on their face, where they're not going to have a bunch of weird and harsh shadows falling all over the place. As you can see in some of these scenes and some of these setups, once again, you're running into this overhead fluorescent lighting that's super flat, super non-flattering. But, you know, if you can have some type of natural light in that situation or in that scene, it can really make a world of difference. Now, here's some natural lighting where I'm actually using modification. So in this particular scene right here, I actually was able to have a couple of hands on deck to help me. So what I did was I set my subjects up in a spot where I knew I can bounce the light back into their face. And I used one of those reflectors with a white and a gold side. And for some reason, this day, the gold side was looking really good for me. Usually I don't use like the metallic sides. I usually only use the white side. But, you know, for this particular shot, I did reflect it with the gold side. And I feel like the lighting came out really nice. It came out really soft. It came out really natural. It wasn't overbearing. It didn't look like I had a spotlight on them. It didn't look like we were trying. It just looked like it was. It looked natural. And for me, that's when you get the best results. Now let's quickly look at some studio reviews. So right now I'm currently using a 36-inch softbox with a grid on it, and it's got 2 layers of diffusion. That's what I'm using right now to light this video. But if you look right here, this is a video I shot the other day where I reviewed this actual light that I'm using. And in this particular scene, you can see this is just with the softbox with no grid on it, right? It's the softbox, the 2 layers of diffusion, but no grid. Now, if you fast forward to this scene, you can see it with the same setup, same power, 2 layers of diffusion with a grid. And you can see how much you control the actual spill of light. And that's what the light modification does for you. It helps you control the direction and the spill of your light. So let's take a look at some of these examples. These are actually interviews that I did right here in studio. Now this is done with a particular, or this lighting that I use for these interviews was with a panel light. Now there's nothing wrong with panel lights. I don't tend to like that they don't have a lot of aftermarket modifiers or really nice modifiers, but I used a panel light here and I used modification. Now the modification that I used was a big shower curtain. So this way I was able to create a bigger light source and a softer light source. And that's the main reason that we use the modification. We're either trying to control how big or how small, how harsh or how soft our lighting is. Now I feel like in this particular situation, the lighting did work out, right? I really do like it. I feel like it could be a little bit softer, but for the most part, I do like it. The problem with this setup is that in studio, it works really well. But if I was to take this out in the field, I would have to set up my panel light and then set up this huge shower curtain. If I'm by myself, it's a nightmare, forget about it. And it just takes up too much space. It's not really efficient. And that is my biggest problem with the panel lights. Now, real quickly, let me say this. There's nothing wrong with panel lights. I feel like they are actually pretty good. And those were I got a lot of them, and they were how I really first started with my lights. As you can see here in this scene, I shot a podcast and I used panel lights to light up the scene. So it works out well because it didn't have to be super crazy. It didn't have to be super dramatic. It didn't have to be super cinematic. You know, I just needed something to get the scene lit up so everybody can be seen. They didn't have any weird or harsh shadows on their face. And, you know, it just upped the, you know, the level of the production that we were shooting. If it was complete natural light, it would have just looked weird, overhead, you know, fluorescent, flat lighting, and it would have made the image look really dull, boring, and flat. Now let's take a jump back onto one of the scenes that I showed you previously in this video, where I was using a light, but I didn't have a lot of modification, but I needed a light in the situation to be able to, you know, make my subject nice and clear and not have weird and harsh shadows. Fast forward. Here we are in the same, you know, setting, same office, right? But this time my light was this 36-inch softbox with a grid. So you can tell the difference now. The lighting is so much softer and it looks way more natural, okay? And it allows the office to kind of be what the office is. It was kind of like a weird office. The walls were like really brown, really red, but it actually kind of worked out with the color of his suit. But aside from that, it allowed the office to be what it is. It allowed the lighting of the office to work how it works and to really control the spill of light. So that way it wasn't all over the place. It was really focused on my subject. It wasn't all on the background or flaring in my lens, any of that type of stuff, right? It really was on the subject. It was kind of, focused but soft, and it helped my subject pop out. So lighting with composition really makes a big difference, because if we look at the first clip, the composition here wasn't that great. I mean, it worked, it was fine. We had a lot of people in the office that day, so it actually wasn't a lot of space to move around. But when we fast forward to this one here, I was able to create some type of depth in the image. I was able to shoot into a corner instead of shooting into a back wall, using that nice lighting. It was just us two, and so we had more space to move around. But you can tell the difference that the modification in my light has made from that first scene to this scene. So here's my suggestion when it comes to lights. If you're buying a light, especially for video production, my suggestion would be to get a cob light or chip on board light. Now, these are really popular. They're starting to be at really reasonable price points. But my main reason for getting that light is because you have more options when it comes to modifying that light, especially if you can get one with a bones mount, because then you have an option or all types of options to all types of different soft boxes, whether they be octagon or strip boxes or square, rectangle, whatever the case may be. You have a lot of options. It's a quick mount. It's an easy mount. If you're a one-man band, it is really great because it's boom, boom, in and out. Really great, really fantastic. Now, panel lights work. I like panel lights. Like I said, I have panel lights. The problem with panel lights is that you don't really have a lot of options when it comes to modifying those lights, okay? Now, you can always find ways to modify a light, right? You can bounce it off of a wall or not have it straight at your subject, maybe bounce it off some type of reflector or whatever the case may be. But those lights aren't always super powerful. And, it's just unfortunate that in the aftermarket, you don't have a lot of options. So my suggestion would be to get one of these chip on board lights or these cob lights with a Bowens mount specifically, so this way you have a plethora of options that you can use. And if for the time being you don't have the budget to get one of these lights, remember, natural lighting is a lot of times your best friend. As long as you can figure out a nice way to set up your subject to be able to get some natural light where you don't really have to go ahead and crank up your ISO all crazy to try to get like a well-lit image, or where you're going to lose the highlights or this or that, right? You can use natural light, some modification, as you can see, like I said here, I use natural light, but I bounce the light back onto my subject. That's always a great option. So don't feel like you have to have one of these lights, but if you can get it and put it into your budget, it's going to really scale up the level of your production. So I'll include a couple of links below for some of the lights and the modifiers that I'm currently using. Hopefully you can go ahead, check those out, see if it's something that might work for you. With all of that being said, I hope this video was useful and helpful, and if so, give me a like, drop me a comment, and let me know what type of light modifiers and lights are you using in your current productions right now. And until the next time, keep on shooting and doing what you're doing. Peace.